Case 1. Michael Meyers. The Bronx Garage Murders. Michael Meyers lived with his wife and 6 children in a quiet Bronx neighborhood. From the outside, their home looked like any other. A cramped but busy family house with kids playing in the yard, and a father who seemed ordinary enough. But inside, life was far from normal. For years, Myers's behavior had been growing erratic. His wife described him as volatile and controlling. He believed in punishing the children harshly for even the smallest mistakes. By 2019, the house had turned into something close to a prison, ruled by Michael and his temper. On the evening of June 22, 2019, Myers's 8-year-old son, Michael Jr., and 10-year-old daughter, Nasha, had reportedly misbehaved. Instead of sending them to bed or grounding them, Meyers ordered the 2 children into the family's detached garage. He told them to stay there until they learned their lesson. The night was warm, humid, and airless, the kind of New York night when even open windows can't help. Meyers locked the door and left the children there overnight. The garage had no ventilation, no fan, and no way for the kids to escape. By morning, both were dead. When police arrived, they found the garage stifling hot. Investigators later said the interior temperature likely reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius. The children's bodies showed no signs of physical injury, only dehydration and heat exhaustion. It was a slow, preventable death. Officers took Meyers into custody on the spot. During questioning, he showed no visible emotion. At first, he insisted the deaths were an accident, claiming he didn't realize the garage would get so hot, but prosecutors later revealed that neighbors had warned him before about locking the children in there as punishment. This wasn't the first time he'd done it. Myers's wife told police she'd been afraid to intervene. She said she'd tried to protect the other children, 4 surviving siblings, but feared what her husband might do to her if she called for help. The city's Administration for Children's Services confirmed that the family had been investigated once before, yet the kids had not been removed. After the deaths, the remaining children were immediately placed into foster care. The community reaction was a mix of disbelief and anger. Neighbors said that they'd often heard shouting from the Meyers home, but never imagined something like this could happen. "He looked like a regular dad, but I guess you just never know what's going on behind closed doors," one neighbor said. The medical examiner ruled both deaths as homicides. Meyers was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and endangering the welfare of a child. His defense attorney argued that the incident was a tragic lapse in judgment, not intentional. But prosecutors pointed to the locked door and prior warnings as clear evidence of deliberate neglect. The case drew widespread attention across New York City and reignited debate about the state's child welfare system. Specifically, how prior investigations could miss warning signs in homes already known to authorities. Meyers eventually accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt to 2 counts of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. His surviving children were permanently placed with relatives outside the Bronx. In the end, what happened inside that garage was the product of one man's unchecked rage and a system that failed to see how dangerous he had become. 2 children died, not from violence, but from confinement, a punishment their father never had the right to give. Case 2. Paul Caneiro. The Colts Neck Family Murders. On the morning of November 20th, 2018, a mansion in Colts Neck, New Jersey, erupted in flames. When firefighters arrived, the house was engulfed. Inside, they found a horrifying scene. 4 members of the Caneiro family dead. At first, Investigators thought it was a tragic house fire. Within hours, it became clear it was murder. The victims were Keith and Jennifer Caneiro and their 2 children, 11-year-old Jesse and 8-year-old Sophia. Keith had been shot multiple times outside the home. Jennifer and the children were discovered inside, their bodies badly burned. Investigators soon realized the fire had been set intentionally, not to destroy the house, but to hide a crime. As police pieced the day together, suspicion turned toward Keith's older brother, Paul Caneiro. The two had grown up close and even went into business together, running a technology company in Asbury Park and a real estate firm in Ocean Township. But behind the family business image was deep resentment. Prosecutors said Paul believed Keith was cutting him out financially and that he was motivated by greed and vengeance. Hours before the Colts Neck fire, Paul's own home in Ocean Township also caught fire. That blaze, however, was small, a single area near the base of his house. Firefighters quickly extinguished it and noticed something strange. Paul was standing outside, fully dressed, holding a garden hose. He claimed someone had tried to kill him and his family. By nightfall, detectives connected the 2 incidents. Ballistics tests matched shell casings from the Colts Neck scene to a gun registered to Paul Caneiro. Surveillance footage and phone data placed him near his brother's home around the time of the murders. Prosecutors alleged that Paul shot Keith outside, then went inside and killed Jennifer and the children before setting fires in multiple rooms. He then returned home, ignited his own minor blaze, and called police to make it appear as though he, too, was a target. When police arrested him, Paul denied everything. His attorney claimed the brothers had no serious dispute and that Paul would never harm his family. But the evidence was overwhelming. Traces of gasoline on his clothing, inconsistencies in his story, and digital records that contradicted his alibi. Investigators described the case as one of the most disturbing domestic homicides in Monmouth County history. The sheer calculation of it, the attempt to kill his brother, his sister-in-law, and 2 children, and then stage his own house fire, shocked even veteran detectives. Prosecutors charged Paul Caneiro with 4 counts of first-degree murder, aggravated arson, and weapons offenses. The motive, they said, was financial strain. He'd been embezzling from the businesses and feared his brother would expose him. When Keith confronted him, Paul snapped. The trial has faced multiple delays due to the complexity of the evidence and ongoing appeals over pretrial rulings. As of now, Paul Caneiro remains in custody awaiting trial, maintaining his innocence. In the years since, the Colts Neck mansion has been demolished. What remains is an empty lot, overgrown and silent, a stark contrast to the comfortable family life that once filled the space. Neighbors still recall the day smoke filled the sky, thinking it was just another house fire. By nightfall, they learned an entire family was gone, and the man accused was someone they'd seen at barbecues, family gatherings, and business events for years. For investigators, the case is a reminder that family feuds don't always explode in public. Sometimes they ignite quietly until the damage can no longer be undone. Case 3. Neil White, the Mamaroneck murder. On June 20th, 2017, police in Mamaroneck, New York, received a 911 call from a man claiming he had done something terrible. When officers arrived at the small home on Chestnut Avenue, they found 47-year-old Neil White sitting calmly on the front steps, his face expressionless. Inside the house, in a second-floor bedroom, Officers discovered his 7-year-old daughter, Gabrielle White, lifeless on the bed. Next to her was a stuffed animal and a handwritten note that read, "I am sorry." The discovery stunned the quiet Westchester County neighborhood. Neighbors described White as polite, professional, a single father raising his daughter after separating from his wife. Gabrielle, known as Gabby, was a bright, cheerful child who loved reading and gymnastics. Her teachers at Chatsworth Avenue School said she had a contagious laugh and a natural kindness that drew others to her. But behind the image of a caring father was a man coming apart. White had once been a magazine publisher with an Upper East Side apartment and a reputation for charm. By 2017, his life had collapsed. He had been convicted of bank fraud, served prison time, and was now on probation. His marriage had failed, his finances were in ruins, and custody arrangements allowed Gabrielle to spend weekdays with him and weekends with her mother. Friends said he had grown increasingly despondent in the months before the killing. He was living in the small rented home, unemployed and deeply depressed. Yet no one imagined he would harm the one person who loved him unconditionally. The interrogation that followed was brief. White confessed to killing his daughter, saying he didn't want her to grow up without him. Detectives described his tone as eerily calm. No shouting, no tears, no visible remorse. Prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder. In court, they described the killing as selfish and calculated. Not an impulsive act of despair, but a deliberate decision to end a child's life to spare himself loneliness. At his 2018 trial in Westchester County Court, jurors heard from psychiatrists, teachers, and police officers. The defense argued that White had been in a suicidal fog, incapable of rational thought, but prosecutors pointed to the handwritten apology note and his decision to call 911 as signs of full awareness. The jury deliberated for just 5 hours before returning a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. At sentencing, White faced Gabrielle's mother, who told the court, "You were supposed to protect her. You were supposed to love her more than yourself." Judge Barry Warhit called the murder a monstrous act of selfishness and sentenced Neil White to 25 years to life in prison. Today, he is serving his sentence at Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora. Gabrielle's classmates planted a tree at their school in her memory, decorating it each spring with handwritten messages and paper hearts. The story of Neil White remains one of the most haunting family murders in New York's recent history. A father who couldn't bear to lose control of his world and chose to destroy the only truly innocent part of it. Case 4. Michael Valva, the freezing death of Thomas Valva. On the morning of January 17, 2020, police in Center Mauritius, Long Island, responded to a 911 call from an off-duty NYPD officer named Michael Valva. He reported that his 8-year-old son, Thomas, had fallen in the driveway and was unresponsive. Paramedics arrived to find the boy cold to the touch, his body temperature a shocking 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Valva said Thomas had slipped on ice. But when doctors examined the child, the truth was far more horrifying. Thomas hadn't fallen. He had frozen to death. Investigators learned that Thomas, who was autistic, and his 2 brothers had been subjected to years of abuse inside their father's home. Michael Valva, then 40, lived with his fiancée, Angela Polina, and their combined 6 children. Security cameras installed throughout the house captured the daily cruelty that would later become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Footage revealed that the boys were forced to sleep in an unheated garage, even during freezing temperatures. They were routinely denied food, showers, and bathroom access. Instead, they were punished for soiling themselves and forced to clean their messes with cold water. On the night before Thomas's death, temperatures on Long Island dipped to around 19 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 7 degrees Celsius. Surveillance video and audio recordings captured Valva and Paulina mocking the boys as they shivered in the garage. At one point, Valva can be heard saying, "He's hypothermic. You know why? Because he's cold," before laughing. When morning came, Thomas could barely stand. His father ordered him to go outside and wait for the school bus. Minutes later, the boy collapsed in the driveway. Rather than call for help, Valva reportedly hosed him down with cold water, insisting he needed to wake up. By the time first responders arrived, Thomas's heart had stopped. Detectives from the Suffolk County Police Department quickly found the story inconsistent. Inside the home, the garage reeked of urine. Surveillance equipment showed the timeline leading directly to the child's collapse. Within days, both Michael Valva and Angela Paulina were arrested and charged with second-degree murder and endangering the welfare of a child. The case stunned the region. Valva had been a 10-year veteran of the NYPD, a man sworn to protect others. Yet at home, he was a tormentor. At trial in 2022, prosecutors played the disturbing recordings in court. Jurors listened as Valva and Paulina taunted the boys, calling them animals and disgusting. Experts testified that Thomas's death was consistent with prolonged hypothermia and starvation, not an accident. The defense tried to argue that Valva was overwhelmed, that he had made tragic mistakes in discipline, not murder. But jurors saw the difference. The abuse had gone on for months. Teachers had repeatedly reported bruises and signs of neglect. Social services had been alerted, yet the boys remained in the home. After a 4-week trial, the jury deliberated just one day. On November 4th, 2022, Michael Valva was found guilty of second-degree murder and child endangerment. He was later sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Months later, Angela Paulina faced her own trial. Jurors saw the same footage, Paulina mocking Thomas, enforcing punishments, and refusing to turn on heat in the garage. She too was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life in 2023. In the wake of the verdicts, Suffolk County launched internal reviews of its child welfare failures. School officials testified that they had made more than 20 separate reports to Child Protective Services, warnings that went unanswered. Today, Thomas Valva's death remains one of New York's most heartbreaking cases of child abuse. His surviving brothers were placed with relatives, far from the home where they had endured years of cruelty. At the school he once attended, classmates planted a small garden in his memory, a quiet space meant to remind visitors that compassion, not punishment, is what every child deserves. Case 5. Ryan Lawrence, the murder of Maddox Lawrence. On the night of February 20th, 2016, an Amber Alert spread across Syracuse for a missing 21-month-old girl named Maddox Lawrence. Police officers, volunteers, and neighbors searched through parks, bus stations, and streets in freezing temperatures. What began as a missing child alert quickly turned into a case that would leave the community shaken. Ryan and Morgan Lawrence lived a quiet life with their daughter Maddox in a small Syracuse apartment. Maddox had already survived a rare eye cancer as an infant, enduring surgery and treatment with remarkable strength. Her recovery drew support and admiration from family, medical staff, and the community. But while Maddox became a symbol of resilience, Ryan began struggling with feelings of insecurity and emotional instability. According to prosecutors, he felt overshadowed by the attention surrounding his daughter's illness and recovery, and over time, these feelings darkened his state of mind. On February 20th, Ryan left home with Maddox and left a note that worried her mother. The message hinted at self-harm and harm to Maddox, prompting immediate concern. When Morgan returned and found the note, she contacted police, who issued an Amber Alert. That night, Ryan traveled across central New York by bus with Maddox. As the hours passed, the initial hope of finding her safe began to fade. By the next morning, the search expanded as police tracked Ryan's movements across multiple towns. Detectives followed surveillance footage, bus route data, and eyewitness accounts to trace Ryan's path. The search lasted through the night and into February 21st. That afternoon, authorities found Ryan near Baldwin Canal Park in Baldwinsville. He was alone. Maddox was not with him. Ryan was taken into custody, and during questioning, he revealed where police could find his daughter. Investigators located Maddox in a remote area. The recovery ended the search and confirmed what police had begun to fear. This was no abduction. It was a homicide. Prosecutors presented a heartbreaking motive. They said Ryan had become emotionally unstable, resentful, and overwhelmed by the attention his daughter received during her cancer treatment and recovery. His sense of inadequacy grew into a harmful belief that the family would be better off without her. Rather than put Maddox's mother and family through a trial, Ryan pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. In 2016, he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, the maximum penalty for the charge. The judge emphasized the profound betrayal, noting that a father's role is to protect, not harm, his child. The community of Syracuse mourned the loss of a child who had already overcome so much in her short life. Vigils were held throughout the area, and purple ribbons, the color associated with eye cancer awareness, appeared on trees, fences, and storefronts in Maddox's honor. Maddox's mother withdrew from the public eye as she grieved privately, supported by family and friends. Maddox Lawrence's story remains a reminder of the fragile line between emotional struggle and irreversible tragedy. Case 6. Shane Walker, the Staten Island family murders. On the morning of June 22, 2019, a 911 call from a Staten Island apartment led first responders to a scene they would never forget. Inside a South Beach home, police discovered 37-year-old Alla Ausheva and her two young children, 3-year-old Ella and 2-year-old Ivan. All three were dead. What began as a welfare check quickly became one of New York's most disturbing family homicide cases. Shane Walker and Alla Ausheva lived in a modest apartment in the South Beach section of Staten Island with their two children. Alla, originally from Russia, was a respected member of the U.S. Army National Guard, building a life and career in New York. Friends and neighbors described the family as quiet and loving, with no known history of violence. But beneath the surface, Walker was facing growing stress and emotional instability. According to prosecutors, he struggled with personal and financial pressures that escalated in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. On June 22, 2019, events inside the couple's apartment turned deadly. Investigators later determined that Alla was killed first. She was found with fatal stab and strangulation injuries. The children, Ella and Ivan, were found inside the home. Prosecutors said they had been drowned. After the killings, Walker set a small fire inside the apartment before leaving, in what investigators believed was an attempt to conceal the crime scene. Smoke was visible when emergency services arrived. The timeline suggested the homicides occurred before sunrise, with the fire discovered during the morning welfare check. The NYPD and FDNY quickly secured the home once the fire was contained. Inside, detectives found signs of a staged scene, including evidence of arson. It did not take long for Walker to become the primary focus of the investigation. Hours after the bodies were discovered, police located Walker a few miles away on Staten Island. He was taken into custody. At that time, investigators gathered statements, forensic evidence, and surveillance footage to establish the sequence of events. Walker was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including murder, manslaughter, arson, and criminal possession of a weapon. The charges reflected the brutality of the case and the attempt to destroy evidence after the killings. For several years, the case moved through the court system as prosecutors prepared to try Walker for the deaths of his partner and children. The charges remained among the most serious available under New York law. On August 18, 2024, more than 5 years after the murders, Shane Walker pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder in the second degree. With the plea, the facts of the case were legally confirmed, and a trial was avoided. Walker was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison, ensuring he will remain behind bars for decades, with the possibility of spending the rest of his life incarcerated. The murders stunned the Staten Island community, especially those living in the South Beach and Arishar neighborhoods. Neighbors who once saw the family on walks or at local shops struggled to understand how such violence could unfold behind closed doors. Members of the National Guard, friends, and local residents held memorials to honor Alla, Ella, and Ivan. Many described Alla as a devoted mother whose life in the United States had been defined by perseverance, service, and love for her children. The deaths of Alla, Ella, and Ivan remain a heartbreaking reminder that even the closest held family struggles can hide fatal unseen breaking points.